The power you don't see. On the world map, Singapore looks insignificant, a tiny red dot surrounded by giants. No vast land, no oil fields, no massive population, and no superpower military. Yet behind closed doors, the world's biggest countries quietly study, copy, and follow Singapore. Presidents, prime ministers, economists, military planners, and city designers all ask the same question. How did this small island get so much right while powerful nations struggle? Singapore does not shout. It does not threaten. It does not dominate headlines with wars or political drama. Instead, it leads silently through systems that work, policies that deliver results, and institutions that don't collapse under pressure. When global leaders talk about fighting corruption, they reference Singapore. When cities plan smart infrastructure, they study Singapore. When countries want to attract investment without chaos, they look at Singapore's model. This is not accidental success. It is engineered power, quiet, disciplined, and deeply strategic. Singapore proves a dangerous truth: real power is not about size, noise, or force, it's about control, trust, and long-term thinking. That's why big countries follow Singapore quietly, because admitting it publicly would mean admitting their own failures. In today's world of collapsing economies, political instability, and public mistrust, Singapore stands as a living case study of what works. And that makes it influential far beyond its borders. If you enjoy deep, reality-based content like this, is content that goes beyond headlines and exposes how the world truly works, don't forget to subscribe, because what you're about to hear next might completely change how you understand power. Singapore turns stability into global influence. Big countries struggle with instability, political protests, policy reversals, corruption scandals, and sudden economic shocks. Singapore built its influence by doing the opposite. It became one of the most stable countries on earth. Stable laws. Stable leadership. Stable institutions. Investors, global banks, and multinational companies value stability more than promises. Singapore offered them predictability, and predictability attracts power. When big countries want to understand how to create long-term confidence, they study Singapore's governance model quietly, because stability is hard to sell politically back home. Singapore proved that discipline beats democracy chaos. Many powerful nations struggle with policy paralysis caused by excessive political noise. Singapore chose disciplined governance over emotional politics. Policies are based on data, not popularity. Long-term national interest comes before short-term votes. This allowed Singapore to plan decades ahead in housing, education, transport, and economy. Big countries follow this model silently because openly admitting it would challenge their democratic narratives. But behind closed doors, Singapore's efficiency is deeply admired. Economic neutrality made Singapore a global broker, Singapore mastered a rare skill, being everyone's friend. It trades with the United States and China. It welcomes Western capital and Eastern manufacturing. It avoids ideological battles and focuses on economic logic. This neutrality turns Singapore into a financial, diplomatic, and logistical bridge between rival powers. Big countries follow this approach quietly because neutrality offers power without enemies, a luxury few can publicly claim. Education turned humans into resources. Singapore had no natural resources, so it created human capital. Its education system focuses on skills, discipline, and adaptability. Students are trained to solve problems, not just pass exams. This produced engineers, managers, scientists, and financial experts who power the nation. Big countries with massive populations envy this efficiency. They study Singapore's curriculum design, teacher training, and merit-based systems, often without admitting how broken their own education models are. Housing policy created social control and peace. Unlike many countries where housing creates inequality and unrest, Singapore used housing as a stabilizing tool. Most citizens own government-regulated homes. This reduced slums, lowered crime, strengthened social responsibility, and tied personal success to national stability. Big countries quietly study this model because housing reform threatens powerful private interests, but Singapore proved that controlled ownership can create national strength. Singapore built a reputation stronger than weapons. Trust is Singapore's greatest export. Contracts are honored. Laws are enforced. Systems function. As a result, global corporations, banks, and governments trust Singapore more than many larger nations. This reputation gives Singapore influence in global finance, arbitration, and diplomacy. Big countries follow this quietly because rebuilding trust is harder than building weapons. Long-term vision replaced short-term politics. While many governments think in election cycles, Singapore thinks in generations. Infrastructure is built for the future. Environmental planning is proactive. Economic transitions are prepared years in advance. Big countries admire this discipline but struggle to implement it due to political pressure. So they study Singapore silently, learning without committing publicly. Singapore controls systems, not people. Singapore's power does not come from suppressing citizens, but from designing systems that reduce failure. Efficient transport. Digital governance. Transparent processes. These systems remove friction from daily life, allowing productivity to flourish. Big countries follow this approach quietly because system reform requires dismantling inefficient bureaucracies, a painful political process. Conclusion: the power that needs no announcement. Singapore proves that influence does not need volume. It needs results. Big countries follow Singapore quietly because Singapore exposes an uncomfortable truth: size does not guarantee success, and power does not require noise. Discipline, trust, stability, and long-term thinking create a form of influence that weapons cannot. In a world obsessed with dominance, Singapore chose excellence. And that choice made it impossible to ignore. If this analysis gave you a new perspective on global power, subscribe for more deep, honest content, because the world makes much more sense when you look beyond the headlines.